Welcome to the Philly Prime podcast and mobtalksitdown.com. Joining me today and doing some filing there, George Anastasia. Good to see you, George. Every year, George, you and I at the beginning of summer, we talk about the Philly mob and summer down the shore with the mob. And this year, we're going to talk a little bit about a little reorganization kind of at the top. But Joey Merlino popped up in Philly Magazine today, right before the Memorial Day weekend. The Skinny on Skinny, written by Victor Fiorillo from Philly Mag. And it was quite an interesting piece, George. Break a little bit of it down for us.
Yeah, it was an interesting Q&A. I mean, Victor Fiorillo asked some good questions. Joey, as is Joey's approach, didn't always answer the question. But Joey clearly has created a brand, and Joey has a message that he wants to get out, and he did a good job getting that message out. He said he's no longer involved in that other life that he was involved in, that he's an entrepreneur, that he's got his cheesesteak, that he hopes to franchise it and I think he said make $1 million or $1 gazillion and then, go off into the sunset. Clearly, Joey has a plan, or at least a concept of a plan, and we'll see where it goes. But he's very good at marketing himself. He's very good at creating a brand, and he's done that, and he's building off of that.
Well, and he went on to say, no crime. I'm not involved in crime. I was never involved in violence. Yeah, gambling and receiving stolen property, but I shouldn't have done 12 years in jail on a racketeering charge. We beat the murders. He was very clear to kind of distance himself from his past. Fiorillo kept trying to go back there, in fact, and said, there is no present without the past with you, Joe. But Joey did say he wants to franchise, come up with 1,000 restaurants, buy a yacht, and sail off into the sunset in his 60s here. He does sound like he wants to turn the page. Can he do that, George? That's my question.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I'm sure people in law enforcement are rolling their eyes about this, and they're rolling their eyes at a lot of stuff that Joey said. But, other guys have done it. Joey is a little bit different in that he's doing it publicly and making no bones about it and just saying it. Here's who I am now. Here's what I want to do. It's a little different than, some guys have retired and just walked away. Joey retired and hasn't walked away. He's still very much. I mean, you can't talk about Philadelphia organized crime, Cosa Nostra, without mentioning Skinny Joey Merlino. It's just the way it is. And I think he realizes that. And I think what he's doing now is carving out a niche. Yeah, I was that guy. I was part of that guy. I wasn't the violent guy that the feds say, but that was part of my life. It's not part of my life now, and I'm moving in a different direction. That was
1989 all the way to 2025. He's been the topic of discussion when you talk about the Philly mob, courtesy of you and I and other reporters, and even current day kind of thing. So it's tough to kind of shake that background and create this new thing, but he's going at it aggressively here, no doubt about it, including Philly Mac.
Yeah, and he's doing it. He's very good at what he's doing. There's no doubt about that as well. So we'll see how it plays out. It's all new ground, Dave. This has never been done before. The guys that do podcasts are guys that cooperated and they confess to the life that they were in. Joey's not confessing to anything that he is who he is, and this is who I am today, and here's where I'm going.
Yeah, take it or leave it. Interesting. Fiorillo said if I placed a $10,000 bet down about whether you might be indicted again, his answer was very interesting, George. Give it to us.
Yeah, I mean, he says the feds are always going to be out there. They're always going to be looking to indict him. And he realizes that. It's almost like it comes with the territory. I think what he and what these other guys have to worry about, and they're very cognizant of this, I think the only problem they could possibly have down the road is, there are 4 or 5 unsolved murders, and the statute of limitations never runs on a murder. So they got to worry about that coming. Now, again, Joey's been through this. Joey's beaten murder raps, and Joey says he has never done anything like that. So we'll see how it plays out. But that always hangs in the shadows. I mean, it always comes back to what the late Ronnie Prevda used to say. You know what you've done. The question is, can the feds prove it? That's what it comes.
Interesting. The last line of that about the $10,000 bet is bring it on, he says to the feds, almost challenging them to come try and get him. all of this new persona, Joey's new persona, kind of plays into his withdrawal defense. Should he be charged again? I'm not involved. I'm no longer involved. Look, I'm an entrepreneur. I have a cheesesteak shop, wildly popular. You name it, they've dropped in there, from Jason Kelsey to Big Dom from the Eagles. You name it, they've dropped by the place to sample, and they've all given it rave reviews. So he's kind of building that where he could actually tell a jury, if he had to down the road, he's not facing any charges now, that, hey, that's not my life anymore. That wasn't my life, and that's not my life now.
Yeah, I mean, John Gotti Jr. used that defense, I think, fairly effectively up in New York, and this is that defense writ large. I mean, and clearly Joey is establishing a different persona, and that'll work to his benefit if he ends up facing criminal charges again. And it's a big if. I'm not sure anything is going to happen. I mean, we've seen how many years now where the feds have been tap dancing around this whole organization, and what have they come up with? Relatively minor charges in the greater scheme of things. And I don't know that they're focused anymore on those guys. I
don't think they are either. I mean, I think they're not going with a gambling, loan sharking, racketeering case. It's got to be either a big white collar crime case or something involving violence that you just talked about, those past murders.
Yeah, I think that's where we are. And again, it's the start of another summer season. You know, in the past, we always used to talk about the Geeter and memories. That is all past. And that this life that Joey was a part of is apparently past, or at least that's the perception that he wants to put out there. It's a new summer. It's a new era.
So if we don't have Joey Merlino at the head of the mob anymore in Philadelphia, and he says we don't, we got to look to who is running the show. And we'll start with Michael Lancelotti, who Joey himself, according to testimony in court, told leaders in New York and leaders in North Jersey that Mike Lancelotti, call him Mikey Lance, is the acting street boss on behalf of him. This is back in 2015, 2016, when these meetings took place. And that has been told to other groups, including the Lucchese crime family at meetings up there, that Mike Lancelotti is running the show. And he's an interesting character, George. Never been charged, never been in any of these big indictments, sat in a courtroom and heard Ralph Natale point right at him and say he was a killer in public testimony, but he's never been charged. Your thoughts on Michael Lancelotti, the acting street boss, supposedly?
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who's been around forever. He's always been part of this organization. And I remember many years ago, somebody said to me, Mikey Lance never says anything, doesn't talk. And that's to his advantage. But clearly, I mean, there was testimony that Joey identified him as the acting street boss, or the street boss of Philadelphia. Again, we're going back 7, 8, 9 years now. What's the status today in 2025? I don't think anybody really knows. The other question, Dave, and we've talked about this again and again and again, the boss of what?
Yeah.
The boss of. Keeps coming back to that. You know, it's that day may be past. I mean, Joey may be absolutely correct in saying that's over. That's done with. Other guys have said that as well. We don't know. I mean, this is something that I think the feds are watching, but they're not obsessed with the organized crime with Cosa Nostra in Philadelphia the way they were 12, 15 years ago. And
well, it's interesting because, you know, when this whole thing surfaced that Joey was no longer the boss, that New York had shelved him because of the podcast and all this public persona thing here, there was all kinds of reports that George Borgesi was in charge, some that Mike Lancelotti was in charge. But Mike Lancelotti, and we have a picture here that we're going to show you, recently at the cheesesteak place, sitting down at a picnic bench with Joey, right there, Joey on the left, Mike's in the red shirt there. Supposedly, the Made guys were not supposed to be hanging around with Joey at the cheesesteak place because of the podcast. New York didn't like that kind of thing. But this is a couple of weeks ago, and believe me, he's been there a few times since, according to everybody that I'm talking to, street sources and law enforcement-wise. But there's Mike Lancelotti with Joey Merlino. So clearly, if he's persona non grata with the guys in New York, Mike Lancelotti's not paying attention to that. Your thoughts on that, George? And again, I think you've said sometimes a party's just a party, or a lunch is just a lunch, or a cheesesteak sit down with Joey is just a cheesesteak, right?
Exactly. I mean, these guys have been friends for years. They're having a lunch together at Joey's cheesesteak shop. What does it mean? It may not mean more than that. And the other thing is, and this is typical, it's a kind of a reflection of Joey's attitude. A lot of these guys, I don't think they give a damn what New York says. They don't really. I mean, it's clear that Joey doesn't. I mean, these guys have always marched to the beat of their own drummer. They were, it kept coming back to that during all those trials when we're talking about Cosa Nostra and Omerta and the Code of Silence. These guys, their loyalty was to each other. They're from the same corner down in South Philly. Has very little to do with the mafia or Cosa Nostra. Has more to do with the guys you grew up with, the guys you hung out with. And if you look at that whole organization, the alleged Merlino organization, the hardcore guys, the guys that have been with Joey forever, none of those guys testified. None of those guys flipped. Yeah. And the loyalty, I think, not to Cosa Nostra, but to the guys in the neighborhood.
Yeah. And George, I know guys have told me that themselves from in that inner group, that they'll never take us down if that's what they're trying to do, because nobody in the circle, none of the corner guys that we grew up with are ever going to turn on the other guys. The inner circle will never betray the others in the inner circle. And we're talking about George Borgesi, Marty Angelina, Steve Mazzone, Joey Merlino, Mike Lancelotti. I mean, we're talking about guys that are hardcore friends.
Yeah.
And it's going to take something like that to break that circle. I don't see that happening right now.
No. And then they would argue, what's wrong with being a hardcore friend? There's nothing criminal about that. We grew up together. We know each other since we were kids, and we're loyal to one another. That's kind of the code of the street rather than the code of Cosa Nostra.
Yeah. Interesting. Did a little research, talked to a bunch of street sources, talked to law enforcement a little bit. And Mike Lancelotti has been seen on the street recently with some interesting encounters, including one with Philip Narducci that we reported on a couple of weeks ago after Narducci's name surfaced in a North Jersey case, not charged, that he had met with Georgie Zappola from the Lucchese crime family, who's a capo in Jersey, but the guy in line to be the new head of Lucchese's. The state police in New Jersey claimed in court that they had a meeting between Narducci and Big Joe Perna, and George Zappola, Georgie Neck, and that money changed hands there. About 5 days later, there's a encounter in South Philly between Mike Lancelotti and Philip Narducci. Now, I've not seen that since Philip Narducci came home from prison under the old Scarfo indictments, maybe 8 or 10 years ago. I've not seen them or anybody publicly together like that. We reported that. You take a meeting like that, kind of tells me maybe he is still Lancelotti, the acting street boss, or is it just a couple of pals who bumped into each other for 20 minutes on Packer Avenue?
Well, to be devil's advocate here, you want to say, if they're having a meeting and discussing criminality, are they going to do it out in the open, or are they going to do it secretly?
True.
If nefarious going on, let's go sit inside a clubhouse somewhere. So I don't know the answer to any of this. I just know Narducci is another guy who, at least on the surface, has turned his life around. I mean, he's a businessman. He's got a lot of entrepreneurial things going on. And, we keep coming back. I keep coming back anyway to the question of, why would you want to be the boss in Philadelphia? If you look at the history of Angelo Bruno's killed, Phil Testa's killed, Nicky Scarfo died in prison, Ralph Natale avoided prison by becoming a cooperator, John Stanford is in prison for life. That's the history of being the boss of the Philadelphia mob. Why would you want that?
Yeah.
I mean, these guys we're talking about, the guys who are loyal to one another from the corner, they all know that.
Yeah.
And I think they can go on with their life and I think have a life without having Cosa Nostra as the identity of who they are. I think in fact, I think their identity never revolved around that. Their identity evolved from, we're from 12th and Wolf or whatever. That's what their identity was.
Yeah. Let's talk about George Borgesi, George, for a minute. In the past year, his name has surfaced a couple of times. That New York kind of inserted him in the picture here. There's George from a picture file photo from Mob Talk. That George kind of is the boss because New York says he is, because Joey's involved with the podcast and all this public display and building his persona, that low-key George Borgesi was the boss. But again, when I raise that on the street with guys, they're talking about Mike Lancelotti. They're not talking about George Borgesi. But supposedly New York has put the anointing on Borgesi. He'll tell you just the opposite. He's low-key. I have nothing to do with that anymore. I'm not involved in crime. I'm involved in legitimate businesses, and that's all I'm involved in. Your thoughts? Maybe George isn't the guy.
Well, again, we keep coming back to this. I think George Borgesi conducts himself the way New York would like a mob leader to conduct himself. Doesn't mean he is a mob leader, but his approach, low-key, stay in the shadows, that's just his lifestyle. You know, the bottom line, you may be hearing underworld rumors of this and that. I don't see any law enforcement reports linking him to anything right now. And that's, I think, indicative of what is or what isn't going on. And that's the bottom line. I mean, a lot of these guys, I think, you want to say they've learned their lesson, they've turned the corner, they've decided there's a better way to go. We can sit here and talk and speculate about who's the boss and who's running the show. It keeps back to the boss of what and why do you want to be a boss? That's where it is in Philadelphia right now.
Okay. Also kind of on the roster, one of the street corner buddies, Steve Mazzone.
Yeah, another name.
Just wrapped up 2 years in prison. He's at a halfway house in Philadelphia. He's working, has been seen out and about a little bit recently. Was seen with Mike Lancelotti recently outside a coffee shop down the block from where Mazzone is currently working while he's on halfway house sort of government release here. He's probably going to be in a halfway house for another 6 months or so. Steve did 2 years on the 2020 racketeering case here in Jersey for loan sharking and some gambling stuff, things like that, and a racketeering conspiracy. But he got 5 years. He did about 2.5 and got into a halfway house a little while ago. Where does he kind of fit in the picture here, if there is a picture?
Yeah, I mean, he certainly is part of that group, and he certainly is part of any hierarchy, if there is a hierarchy. This is a guy who's done time a couple times now and has always kept his mouth shut. He's well respected. He's a very personable guy. I mean, this is, if you're talking about the Philadelphia mob, he's one example. This is the face of the next generation of the Philadelphia mob. And the next generation is very, very low-key, very, very entrepreneurial. And I think a lot of these guys have decided there are better ways to make a living than the old school, let's shake somebody down. Although, I mean, Stevie's problem clearly was he got picked up on tape. Yeah. In that case, the Persiana case, saying things that really established him as an important figure and a leader and trying to, what do you say, plant the flag in the city again. So that kind of talk can come back to bite you in the ass. I think that's what happened to him there. And again, that's another trait of this particular organization is somebody's always wearing a wire and somebody's always talking out of school and they end up.
George, I still think we got to take our hat off to Joe Legambi. Took over for Joey when Joey went to prison in 2000, ran the show till 2018 or so, turned 80 years old and kind of took a little bit of a time out there. And when Lancelotti was announced supposedly in New York by Joey as the acting street boss, we have a picture of Mike Lancelotti with Joe Legambi outside a clubhouse at 11th and Jackson. Right there's Legambi on the right, Lancelotti on the left. Still some, word on the street that when important decisions need to get made, they do still run it by the senior Hall of Famer, if you will, in Philly mob, a guy who went 18 years, got charged one time in 2011, 2012 in that area, beat the case, got released and went back to his life. He kind of, I'm told, still gets a nod every once in a while if they want to bounce something off him.
Well, this is a guy who's got a lot of experience. I mean, you think about it. This is a survivor. This is a guy all the way back to the Scarfo era through 2010, 2012, was identified as a player and active. And so, yeah, if it's somebody who you trust, somebody who you respect, and somebody who's been through it all, it's logical you go to him with a question. It makes a lot of sense. It's not. Well, that's not unique to the underworld. There's people in the legal profession, people in the medical profession. Same kind of thing. He's an old head. He's done it. Let's ask him, see what he thinks about this.
Yeah. 85 and retired. Still looks pretty good from what everybody says. Still gets around, shows up at a few parties here and there for people, weddings, stuff like that. But keeps a low key, always has kept a low key. George, your famous line, make money, not headlines.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. He's from that school. And I think it served him well. He did some serious time, but he ended up walking away from some serious problems. And he's enjoying life now. I think he's enjoying being in the shadows and being somebody who's respected and somebody who, if there's a problem, somebody might come and ask, how would you handle this? Because he's been there. He's been through it.
Okay. George, I want to talk about an interesting encounter I had down here in Ocean City week before last. I was out at night after dinner on a bike ride on Asbury Avenue, and a black SUV approached me from behind. The window gets rolled down, and I hear, "What do you think it's like being followed? How do you like it?" kind of thing. And I start laughing, and the car pulls up next to me, and much to my surprise, Joseph Perna, little Joe Perna, sitting in the passenger seat, and George Borgesi sitting in the driver's seat, driving him around. Little Joe Perna is a soldier or captain, allegedly, in the Lucchese crime family up north. They're in a lot of problems right there. That whole family's in kind of disarray. George Borgesi was in the driver's seat. I had a very cordial, respectful, and 10-minute conversation with the two of them. And I asked Joe Perna how he was doing, and he says, "I'm doing pretty well considering half my family is in prison now." They got caught up in that Jersey State Police Attorney General's Office FBI operation about a month ago, where they locked up Big Joe Perna, John Perna, George Zappola, Georgie Neck, that we talked about before, and a couple of other guys, including a Prospect Park city councilman who got caught up in that. So they're dealing with that. Your thoughts about the two of those guys being together, and then we'll get to why they were together.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's always been a relationship between the Jersey faction of the Lucchese crime family and the guys down here. And it's interesting how that whole relationship evolved. I mean, originally it was Nicky Scarfo Sr. sent his son Nicky Jr. up there for protection after the hit at Dante and Luigi's. And Nicky Scarfo Jr. supposedly became a made man in the Lucchese organization. But this particular faction that we're talking about leans more toward Merlino than Scarfo. And these younger guys, I mean, they have a relationship that goes back many, many years. And I think this is part of that. It's, you can meet somebody in terms of some circumstance, and then your circumstance changes. You still know that person. So these guys might have met at a time when they were actively involved, and now one is and one isn't, who knows, but they still know one another. And I think, you found out why they were down there, right? I mean, the reason for them. Go into that. What we do?
We'll give you the explanation, George. The explanation to us after the fact wasn't discussed during our little sidewalk conversation there. The explanation was that George Borgesi was introducing little Joe Perna to Lou Barbone, who is the partner of attorney Ed Jacobs, who represents Joey Merlino. Lou Barbone is a very good attorney, represented Sal Piccolo in the last case in 2020. Very sharp. And supposedly, and I had heard this before, I actually ran into Borgesi and Perna here in Ocean City, that Lou Barbone might get in the case to represent Big Joe Perna. And the explanation we got from the Borgesi camp was that George was kind enough to take Joe Perna, little Joe Perna, to meet Lou Barbone in Atlantic City at Eddie Jacobs' office. A friend doing a friendly thing for another friend.
Yeah, and little Joe Perna is the cousin of Big Joe Perna, right? And he's the brother of John Perna. That's just all of that. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, Dave, you mentioned this to me before. What is the state police calling this investigation? Operation what?
I have to remember now, George. It's Fresh something or other, but it's a bizarre name. I still don't have an explanation for it. So until I do, we won't get into a lot of detail there. But it kind of made like no sense to me when I heard it.
Yeah,
And nobody said anything operationally the day they held the news conference or anything. Eat fresh or something like that. It's kind of a, I don't know, was it a bag that somebody delivered money in or something like that that was from a takeout place or something? I have no clue. But it has some slang like that.
There has to be a story behind that. And we mentioned this before. I think that particular case progresses, and we're going to see affidavits, and we're going to find out about taped conversations. A lot more is going to come out. But at the moment, it's a gambling case.
Yeah,
not much.
Exactly.
I was surprised that bail was denied to some people in that case when it isn't much more than that.
Yeah. There's 4 or 5 guys still sitting in jail with no bail. They've appealed. We'll see if an appellate court lets them out. Danger to the community, risk of jeopardizing other witnesses or people in the case. But that case could go to a grand jury and take a couple of years. Operation Heat that involved the Lucchese's back in 2008, 2007, that kind of situation. That lasted almost 2 or 3 years before there was a grand jury indictment. They were picked up on charges. They could be in jail for a while before this gets indicted, and then it could be a couple of years before it actually goes to trial. So you could kind of see why Borgesi would want to help out Joe Perna with securing a very good lawyer, Lou Barbone, to help with Big Joe Perna's case.
And I mean, the other lesson from all of this, and again, I'm looking at this from afar. I don't have all the details. But at the end of the day, if you're running a poker rooms, you're running gambling operations, don't employ a local politician to run one of the joints for you. It's just, you're just asking for trouble.
Yeah.
It seems to be a stupid move.
Yeah. George, can I throw a funny line in from the encounter with George Borgesi and Joe Perna? I said to George Borgesi, it was nice talking to you for a while. I haven't seen you in a while. He lives in Longport. I live in Ocean City. I said, you should stop around Ocean City every once in a while. We can grab a cup of coffee. He paused for a second. He said, Dave, I don't drink coffee. Just like that. We got a chuckle out of that. But again, it was a very cordial street corner conversation. And I appreciated both of them, talking kind of candidly with me and cordially and respectfully. And it ended very nicely. And I believe they drove off and went to dinner. So, but let's shift gears for a second. We are hearing that the former leader of the Pagans Motorcycle Club, Keith Richter, they call him Conan, here he is right here, is about to get out of state prison in New York after doing 2 years on a gun charge in federal prison. He's about to get out of state prison where he was also charged in a gun case. And there's a party coming up for him when he gets home, a welcome home party, which is supposedly in July. I'm hearing he might get out sometime next month in June. That's an interesting thing. He led the Blue Wave, which was a recruitment program for the Pagans in which they kind of almost doubled in size, George, when he was in charge.
Yeah, and his arrest on that gun charge is interesting because it was the law enforcement knew when to stop him and when to make the arrest. And it begged the question back then, is there's somebody within the organization who's cooperating and feeding information. That's something these guys always have to be conscious of. If there's a party, you can be sure the law enforcement will be all over it. Yeah. Watch who's coming, who's going, who's participating. And, that's one of the things, reading the tea leaves. You see who's where, when, who talks to whom, who's invited, who's not invited, those kind of things to get a better idea of the organizational structure. Pagans are a serious group of players.
Yes.
Always have been, and they're expanding and they're getting bigger, and they impact our area in much the same way that Cosa Nostra used to.
Yeah. While Richter was in federal prison, they picked a new leader for the Pagans. That individual was subsequently replaced by another individual, and I'm now being told by experts who follow the biker world and the Pagans very closely that there is, in fact, a new leader again, but he's from Pennsylvania as well. One guy was from Virginia, the original guy who took Richter's place, then a guy from Pennsylvania, now another guy from Pennsylvania supposedly running the show. I'm not going to use his name. It's not out there yet, but I'm being told he is now in charge. And now you have Conan, Keith Richter, coming home from prison. He's probably going to be on some kind of supervisor release from his federal sentence, possibly from his state sentence, not allowed to hang around with convicted felons, bikers, folks like organized crime figures, things like that. So he's going to have to try and tread lightly when he gets home, but he's not that kind of guy, George. He's a tough, up front, in your face kind of guy.
Yeah, always has been. And he knows the way the game is played. I think he'll be smart enough to, if he wants to stay out and maneuver, he'll know how to handle that. And again, these guys have been through a lot, and they bring that experience to the street when they're back on the street. So we'll see how it plays. Pagans, bear watching. It's a serious organization.
Okay. George, let's wrap this up. Should we keep an eye on this Lucchese crime family case up in North Jersey to see if, in fact, it does kind of link into Philadelphia at some point? It doesn't sound like a gambling, loan sharking case, like a racketeering conspiracy case up there is the final goal here. It sounds like they might be chasing something a little bigger here, but right now that's where that case sits.
Yeah, and it's, I think the thing to watch is if this goes further, does it go further by going into New York City, or does it go further by coming down this way? More likely it goes into New York City. And then you're right. I think for all the sound and fury, there must be more to this than what we're seeing right now. So yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of flame over gambling and loan sharking charges and a lot of publicity, including a big news conference. And by the way, there was a lot of online traffic talking about why don't they go after the real criminals, carjackers, drug dealers, killers, gang members, and stuff like that. Let me just point out, in the interest of being fair, since everybody had their comments and said that kind of stuff, that the Attorney General's office in New Jersey has taken down a gang in Newark in the last month. They've taken off several big drug gangs in the past 3 weeks. And they've taken off a group that was carjacking cars and shipping the cars through the port of Newark and in New York over to West Africa, a big gang of folks doing that. So they are doing that other job that they're supposed to do that people are so interested in them doing, including going after crooked politicians, by the way. One of the guys in the case of North Jersey is a sitting city council person in Prospect Park. So they're going after a little bit of political corruption there, although there's not political corruption charges just yet. So all the things they've been criticized with about that case up there, they have actually been doing in recent months. And you've seen Matt Platkin, the Attorney General here in New Jersey, hold news conferences to announce those things.
Yeah, it's not a zero-sum game. And people who do that are just apologists for different organizations. It's law enforcement is enforcing the law. Wherever they find criminality, they go after it. I never buy that argument. Oh, they're picking on us, but why don't they go after this guy? They're looking at everything that's going on. And the cases you just cited are a prime example of that.
Okay. George, we usually talk about the wise guys down the shore. They're not down here yet. In fact, Joey Merlino's playing golf in Boca Raton this weekend with Little Snuff, his partner, and a bunch of other folks. So he moved off to the warmer weather while we still have a little chilly temperatures and a little bit of rain here. He's enjoying himself down in Florida, which is what he likes to tell people he likes most.
Let's see what happens in July. See who's in Margate in July. That's the month to watch.
All right, George, Anastasia, my friend, you're done with the school year, Professor. You're done at Rowan University. Enjoy the summer off. Appreciate you coming on the podcast. Come back again soon, George. Always fun to have a chat with you.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Always a pleasure.
All right. That's it for this week on the Philly Prime Podcast and MobTalkSitDown.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.